everyone, for this watercolour tutorial today I decided to paint some roses. This is a really simple tutorial for beginners. There are 3 different ways I decided to paint each rose that you will see me explain in just a second. Like I say, really easy for anyone. If you've never used watercolour before, this is the perfect tutorial for you. Jumping straight in, to begin with, I pre-mixed a couple of colours, so I created a really light pink and then a purple, so I mixed some of the pink with a little bit of blue to create a really deep purple, mainly for the centre of the rose, as I wanted it to be darker towards the middle. And pink and purple are very cohesive colours, especially if you let the purple have more of the pink in there, which is what I decided to do for this painting. So for the first flower I painted, I used a few dots in the centre of this particular flower and then used a really basic hand movement to create the rest of the petals. It's definitely easier to use a light pressure and then more pressure towards the centre of each petal and then light again, so you kind of have that curvature going on throughout. And the trick for each flower that I decided to paint was to have the petals as close together as possible but not actually touching. This is a really good way to practice control of the paint and obviously where you put it, so I would recommend this as a really good way to learn how to use watercolour if you have never used it before. To keep up with the flow of colour, getting from dark to light as well, once I finished the whole rose, I went back in with a little bit more paint on my brush, and from the centre I decided to darken each petal and lighten it the further out it got, so I just dotted a little bit on each edge that was closest towards the centre. This is a really good way again to practice how you use watercolour, and you can kind of watch the flow of the paint if you want to, see how it does transform the more you add down on the paper, the less you add, and how it all blends together nicely. And it also means again you've got that consistency with the shadows, so it is darker towards the middle and progressively gets slightly lighter the further out you go. Moving on to the next flower now, the only thing that I really did differently was change the centre of this particular rose. So instead of using the dots in the middle, I decided to use the same technique with the curves that we do for the rest of the petals that come out from that centre. So I did 2 really small petals, kind of side by side, top to bottom, that curve around each other, and then use that as the standing point to continue with the petals. So they all transform from this centre and push out, gradually get bigger as well, and it helps create again that really nice cohesive rose. So as we work our way further out from the centre, as you can see, every single petal just gets slightly larger, and again this really helps have that focal point in the middle, and everything again gets lighter the further we come out, so that you can really see the shadows, and it's still got that basic rose structure to it. And then for the last rose, or style of rose I should say, that we're painting today, the only thing differently I did this time was, instead of adding the dots in the centre and adding the 2 slightly curved petals, this time I painted a really small circle, kept the lines really faint, and then I kind of did squiggles in the middle of that circle, so it made it almost look like the bud of the rose, which I thought really looked nice and tied everything together. Also for this rose that I'm now painting, you may notice that it just looks slightly different in terms of where the petals are, so I decided to focus more on perspective for this particular rose. So instead of having it as you would look at it head on, decided to give it more of that curving upwards feel that you would normally get with a flower like this. So I did more petals, did everything coming out from the middle, but I definitely did more towards the bottom, so it almost looks like the centre of the rose is pushing out as it would towards sunlight. After painting these 3 different styles of roses, I then decided it would be a good time to put down some greenery. So I mixed a green that was a little bit colder to begin with anyway, but if you only have an earth green, I also added a little bit of blue to this, so it was more on the colder side. I thought this would look really nice with the pink. I think the two colours are both generally quite cold, so them side by side looked really nice and again cohesive. As well as the leaves that I added down, I then thought it'd be a good idea to mix and match a couple more colours, so I went in with a nice peachy colour for the rest of the roses. Keeping up with that cohesive colour palette today, the peachy colour goes really nice with the pink. There's only really a slight difference between the two colours, which I thought was quite nice. So you had a variety of colours that weren't actually that different from each other. So I mixed a nice vibrant orange with just a little bit of the pink, and I did the same thing again where I had a lighter colour and a darker colour, so I added more water to the one that I wanted lighter, but they are essentially the same colour, just a different shade. So you've got the light and the dark to go in the centre again, and then the light the further out you go with the petals. I then practised all three of the different styles again. And I focused a little bit more on perspective this time, so I added more petals down towards the bottom, just to keep up with what we did previously, but also kind of mix and match it, so you've got the balance between the two different styles and perspectives of each rose. Before I continue with the rest of this painting, make sure to check out all of the links down below in the description. You can find a variety of different tutorials in real time over on my website, over on my Patreon. I upload weekly the same tutorials rather than purchasing individually, so it means that you can really see what I'm up to behind the scenes on a day-to-day basis and keep up with all things watercolour and coloured pencil. You can also find links to all my social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. It's a really good way to keep up with all the nature themed artwork I create, so make sure to check that out. Also, if you can like and subscribe to my channel, that would be amazing. It would mean that I can continue to create these videos and widen my audience, and again give you all that nature themed artwork content. So back to the painting now. I decided to add down some more leaves to really tie everything together for this painting, as it can look quite minimal. I do think this looks really nice, but I wanted to fill the page a bit more with some of these leaves, and it also gives you a chance to have a little bit of a play. As you can see, I did a variety of different styles for this particular part. You can mix and match between adding the thinner lines to replicate leaves, the thicker lines. It's a really good way to practice how you control the paintbrush and get that paint down on paper. And also, if you mess up at this stage, it's not a problem, as the focal point will still be the roses. And if you're worried about that, I would recommend lightening the green paint as much as possible. That way you can really, your eye is definitely drawn towards the centre of the roses. But continuing to fill this space with either leaves or maybe a couple more roses is a really good way to tie this really easy watercolour piece together. And again, it keeps up that consistency, everything is cohesive, ties together really nice, and it's a really good way to finish and practice this watercolour piece. Thank you so much for taking part in this watercolour class with me today. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Like I say, it's really easy, anyone can join in, so I will see you next time for more nature themed artwork.